So today I'm doing my social problem presentation on homelessness, addressing what it is, the sociological lenses we can analyze it from, the effects it has on individuals systemically and personally, and what solutions we can use to address it. So, what is homelessness? Homelessness in the United States has a strict definition provided by the United States Department of Urban Development. It states that anyone sleeping in a public or private place not meant for human habitation, residing in emergency shelter or temporary accommodation, or discharging from an institution where they lived for no more than 90 days after residing in a place not meant for human habitation, emergency shelter, or temporary accommodation. Although this definition doesn't account for broader or more specific circumstances, such as maybe someone who is in a domestic violence situation that doesn't have anywhere to go, or maybe someone that is just couch surfing, it offers us an idea of what we consider a homeless person to be going forward. So, there are a few sociological lenses that we can analyze homelessness through. The first one being symbolic interactionism. A symbolic interactionist might would analyze how homeless people are perceived by individuals according to societal stigmas and labels that have been attributed to them, such as being dangerous or lazy, mentally ill, or a drug abuser. And a symbolic interactionist might ask the question of, when these beliefs are ingrained into people, how does that affect how they would interact or respond to these people or homeless people on the street? A symbolic interactionist may also analyze how a homeless person might view themselves when labeled these things and in turn ostracized for it. Because homelessness is actually one of the most extreme forms of social exclusion. And when given these circumstances, how does it make it harder for them to escape their circumstances? A structural functionalist might view homelessness as a social disruption or function depending on their perspective. As a dysfunction, a structural functionalist might look at homelessness as a systemic failing that should be addressed by the system that is failing them. In contrast, as a function, homelessness might be viewed as a necessary deviance whose role is to be a reminder that if guilty of the same deviances that a homeless person is stigmatized for, such as drug abuse or being lazy, that the individual could end up like them, which would foster social cohesion and conformity. And there's a quote by Steven Seidman that says, "Defiled bodies remind us of the thin line separating order and disorder, artifice and flux, the living and the dead." The last lens that we can look through is conflict theory. A conflict theorist believes that those in power build systems that benefit the wealthy by neglecting the poor. And in our case, the system is capitalism. They believe that systemic failings, quote unquote systemic failings such as high rent, limited housing, low wages, and other limitations that hinder an individual's success are implemented implicitly to keep the poor poor and create mass wealth for the rich. This lens is very common, and I believe the most helpful lens to look at when understanding homelessness. Many of those in pursuit for a solution for homelessness determine it as a struggle anybody can face due to economic hardships, lack of affordable housing, or other systemic barriers. And this idea is mostly attributed to conflict theory, which is why I think this is the best lens to look at, as the people that are trying to find a solution believe in this as well. So, contrary to popular narratives, homelessness is not just due to one's personal failings. And some might argue that the amount of homeless that are mentally ill or addicts proves that it is a personal choice issue and not a systemic one, because there is a high percentage of homeless people who are mentally ill and suffer from addiction. I would still attribute that to systemic failures, because a failure to treat or prevent these issues, even causing these issues, I think that the system can cause it, is often due to a lack of resources and care for vulnerable people from the system. And from 2023 to 2024, there has been an 18% increase in homelessness. And I think that goes to show that this issue is only getting worse, and it cannot just be due to one's personal choices. The criminalization of poverty is one of the things that makes the experiences of being homeless even harder. There are many laws that seem to specifically target economically vulnerable people, such as loitering, vagrancy, anti-camping laws, police sweepings where they sweep out homeless camps, harsh punishments on crimes of desperation, and the fines that come along with these when enforcing these laws. Criminalization creates a cycle of negative effects that only makes homelessness worse. And when enforcing these laws on homeless people's property is often confiscated or destroyed. According to a survey study, where nearly half of them who were surveyed reported that their stuff was lost at the hands of city officials. And this image shows the outcomes that can happen when a homeless person is given a fine. It is a tedious bureaucratic process and leaves no concern for a homeless person's circumstances. This survey found that only 10% of respondents had paid the fine for their most recent citation. And these fines are even more punishing on homeless people because it is extremely difficult for them to pay back, leading to additional penalties and just creating a cycle of debt that affects their ability to be employed and even look for housing. Another thing that a homeless person might experience is a role strain. And role strain is the stress on an individual is the stress that an individual experiences when they struggle to meet the expectations or demands of a single social role. For example, a homeless person is kind of forced to play the role of the quote-unquote respectable beggar, which is contradictory in itself, because to beg is kind of just to leave your dignity and aside. And basically what they have to play in this role is a thin line between someone that looks poor enough to feel sympathy for, but not too poor that it kind of ostracizes them and makes people want to avoid them and feel disgust by them. And when looking too poor, it kind of signifies to other people that they are not self-reliant enough or do not care enough about themselves to even garner sympathy for them. And while now that we've kind of looked at and understand some of the experiences homeless people go through, we can start to look at ideas for a solution. So, starting with decriminalization of homelessness, this consists of decriminalizing laws that specifically punish homeless people, such as the laws that we referred to before, like loitering and anti-camping laws. And by decriminalizing these laws, it would reduce the cycle of fines that we talked about before. It would, and also reduce the criminal record of homeless people, leading them to more access to employment and housing. And through a conflict theorist like kind of idea, it would reduce the clashes between the underclass and authority. And another solution that we can look at is housing with supportive services. So this would mean providing housing that for homeless people that also gives them social services that could help them, such as mental health services or addiction services, and employment services that help them look for employment. And specifying that these services are optional, because when given like autonomy to choose like what they would want to do, it's actually more helpful if a homeless person were to decide for themselves that that is what they want to do instead of just forcing it onto them. And this solution acknowledges the structural vulnerabilities that lead to homelessness and kind of gives them an opportunity to help themselves. But this is also a micro level solution that can be done kind of immediately and help like smaller communities. And policy and economic changes is also a big solution that we can do. It would provide livable wages, so that like the minimum wage would be a livable wage for the people to rent and live. Rent controls so that rent can't be randomly spiked, leading people into homelessness. And public housing would also be provided within this. And this is a macro level solution, so it would help on a systemic level and would kind of help the root cause of these issues. And it would address the state's responsibility for its people and put the responsibility on the state instead of the individual. And it would ultimately reduce instability. However, there are some setbacks for these solutions. One being for decriminalization, that it really doesn't offer any support. It just reduces punishment for homeless people, and it wouldn't prioritize getting them out of the situation. And with housing and support services, these services might be expensive, although I believe that reallocating tax funds and things like that, it probably wouldn't be as expensive as we think. But it would be a treatment to the homeless problem, but it would not be a solution. So it would not directly fix what needs to be fixed. And lastly, The policy and economic changes would require restructuring of a system that is built to suppress. So I think it would be really hard to even do this. And even if implemented, it probably would take years to materialize, and it would not be an immediate solution. However, I think that given that we do all of these solutions and like these solutions grouped together and maybe along with some tweaking, I think that it would address the issues that they might have if they were just standing alone. And I think that it would more positively impact the homeless population than anything. So, yeah, thank you for listening, and these are my references.